go back and have a quick review. We learned that Power Automate has 3 built-in components: triggers, actions, and connectors. In the previous section, we learned about triggers. Now it's time to get into actions. Now, actions are all about what flow can do for us. We call the Power Automate flow, and now this flow is ready to do something for us. Now we want to see what we can ask this Power Automate flow do for us. All those things are defined as actions. So technically, after we create trigger, anything else that we add to a flow are actions. Let's have a quick example of the actions. The only action that we have learned so far is how to create an email and send it to someone. So now I want to create a Power Automate flow that gets the information from an instant trigger and submits them to a SharePoint list. To start with, let's start by creating our SharePoint site. If you just go to SharePoint, no matter where you are, if you have permission to create site, just click on the top of the page on the App Launcher menu. If you click on it, you can click on SharePoint. And if you have permission to create site, you can click on Create Site. And we can start by creating a site that we can work with. For this course, I'm using a communication site, mainly because you need a lot less permission to create a communication site than a team site. So if you're working with a corporate account, it's much easier for you to create a communication site. Design doesn't really matter. I give it a name as Power Automate Workshop. If the name is available, perfect. If the name is not available, just make a quick change and pick something that really works in your organization. I click on Finish, and the site is created. So this is the site that I'm going to work with. I can click on the site contents, and you see in the site, you have a few libraries. You have a style library, you have document library, and you have site pages, and we also have a list called events. So for this exercise, I want to create a list that we can work with. This list is going to be the simplest list possible, which is a custom list. So I click on this settings icon here, and I click on Add an App. So I can create a custom list, and this custom list, I call it Demo List for Power Automate. And I click on Create. So the list is created. I can click on it, and it opens it in a new browser page. And now I can add more columns to it. I have title. Maybe I want to add another choice field, and I call it category. And the choices that I want to pick are business. Next one is marketing, maybe training, maybe HR, and that's enough. I don't want to pick a default value. Everything is good. Let's keep it as simple as possible, and I click on Save. And maybe another one, add another column, and I want to pick multiple line of text, and I call it comments, and I just accept it. Save, and we're all good. Now, we want to create a flow in Power Automate that when user fires the flow, it opens a form, collects some information, and then brings the title, category, and comments here into this list. So just like before, if we go to flow.microsoft.com, and I can click on Create. If you have already learned about the triggers, and this time I want to use an instant flow because I tried to keep the trigger part as simple as possible, now our focus is going to be on actions. So manually trigger flow, I call it Insert to SharePoint List. And then I click on Create. So the new flow is created, and these are the values that I want to pick. I add the first input. It's going to be text, and it's going to be title. I add another field, and that's going to be text. And this time it's going to be category. And for the third one, I want to pick, again, text. And I want to call it comments. And we are all good. So 3 fields, title, category, and comments. And I want to add a new step. And this new step is going to be the insert into this list. This list, I need the site URL. So I just get the URL of the website. Even if you get the entire link, the action is smart enough to trim it. Let's try it. So I get the entire URL, including the list and everything else that is inside it. I bring it back to Flow. And this time I'm looking for SharePoint. I click on SharePoint and I'm looking for create list item. I'm looking for create item. And now I need to add the site address. So if I click on this drop down, it shows me a list of all the sites that I've used before. Now, I created a new site, so I don't have the URL listed in here. I click on enter custom value. And remember, I did not pick only the site URL. I picked the entire URL to that specific list, but this guy is asking me for site address. Let me click on this and paste the entire URL and see what happens. As you can see, it trims it. It takes out every additional characters and just gives me the stripped down URL to the site, which is exactly what I want. If I click on the list name now, I can pick up the demo list for Power Automate, and as soon as I select it, it picks up the list of all the fields in that SharePoint list. Title, the title that I get from the manually trigger a flow. So manually trigger a flow has a title field. Click. Category value, this guy is quite smart. It sees the values inside it, but we don't have it in the form itself. So if you don't have one of these values and you cannot have it hard-coded, you need to get it from somewhere else. In this case, I select enter custom value. And when I select enter custom value, it lets me pick up the list from another trigger or from another action. At the moment, right before this, I have a trigger called manually trigger a flow. And for the category, I can come here, scroll down, and I can find the category right here. And for the comments, that's exactly the same story. There is nothing in here. I can simply get back to the dynamic content again, and this time I'm looking for comments. Click. And I can click Save. Now, because I have an action, I have Save button. Okay, now let's run it and see how it works. Let me just click on Test. I'll perform the trigger action, save and test. First time, it checks the connectivity, and as you can see, now it created another connector to my SharePoint. So if I click on Continue, you will see the form. Title is going to be Test List Item Marketing. I know what you're thinking. I wish we could have dropped down here. We don't. And the reason is that the manual trigger does not support any connectivity to connect to SharePoint and get the available values for this dropdown. So by now, we are happy with what we got. And the comments is going to be some sample text. And I click on Run Flow, click on Done, and it is happily done. So let's get back to the site itself. Just refresh the page. So we managed to create a list item using Microsoft Flow. That was just a demo. Now let's get into a little bit more complex scenarios.